James Mulholland with that report. Let's get some broader analysis and bring in Oliver McTernan, Director of Forward Thinking. Oliver, thank you for being with us. I'm wondering how you're reading this situation right now. Hamas considering this peace plan, but obviously Israel continuing its bombardment.
I think Mark caught it there, the gap between the expectations of Hamas and the statements of Netanyahu. Sunday's talks that brought in Bill Burns and high-level participation began with this standoff between Hamas saying we want a permanent ceasefire. In addition, we want the principle of all for all the prisoners for all the hostages discussed. Netanyahu was saying, no way will there be a ceasefire until we achieve all our objectives, including the total demise of Hamas in Gaza. And also, I'm not willing to discuss the all-for-all principle. So how do you breach that gap? Now, what we're told is these phases, but the report you had from Gaza, we heard the voice of Gaza. The people need now a permanent ceasefire. And we're going to mess around for the next, and I use that word intentionally, we're going to mess around for the next maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks or whatever to get a phase saying, okay, we'll feed you, we'll treat you in this period, but then we'll go back to killing you. I don't think it's what's needed. The cry of the people, the 2.4 million or 2.3 million people in Gaza is we need a ceasefire now. We need food, we need medicine, we need to get our lives back. And that's what should be heard by both sides. 1,200
Israelis killed by Hamas on October the 7th. I don't think anybody, speaking from a strictly neutral point, has anything to say about that other than it was an atrocity. But then you look at the death toll now, currently over 26,900 killed. It does seem, I think, if you look at it again with neutral eyes, disproportionate. Who's in the way of stopping this? Is it solely Benjamin Netanyahu? He seems to be the one who seems to be most gung-ho about going forward and continuing with this war.
I fear so. I mean, you're right in saying there's no debate over the 7th of October. It was horrendous what happened. But the issue is what the old saying used to be, the law lex talionis, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The whole thing was about containing retribution or retaliation. We've totally lost sight of that. And my fear is that you've got two leaders now, on the one hand, Netanyahu, the other hand, Senwar, who are locked in their certainties, are determined that the survival depends on either of them coming out on top of this. And the loser is not just the couple of million people in Gaza. The loser is humanity, because we're losing sight of the norms that were in place after the Second World War, which should govern our whole human relationships. Disputes will happen, but if we can't deal with them in a human way, if we resort to this sort of level of violence and retaliation, I'd fear what's down the road for us, for the whole of humanity. So I think two leaders now seem to be locked in this confrontation, and the price, not just, as I say, the frontline price is paid by the millions in Gaza, but the long-term price will be paid by all of us.
Because while Hamas is considering this deal, what is really important is what Israel does, isn't it?
Yes, and we just look at what's happened. We're not into a week since the ICJ judgment, and we don't see any significant change in Israeli operations in Gaza. And again, that should be deeply worrying. I think there's one player in all of this, and I'm afraid that's Joe Biden. And Biden really needs to look beyond the immediate, political interests and say, look, what I'm looking at now is the whole international order, our rule-based society, how we deal with each other as human beings. And I think he must intervene and say to the Israeli government, enough, we cannot support this. We can't give the political protection we've been given. Because, as you said rightly earlier on, the whole principle of proportionality is being lost.
The US sitting on blocking aid for Ukraine, but at the same time continues to send aid of all kinds to Israel. this is something that perhaps needs to be looked at again. This is what you're saying.
Exactly, because it's first and foremost, the people who are suffering are the people of Gaza. I'm here in Cairo. I've just been talking all day with people who have come out of Gaza, people who time after time rebuilt Gaza after the 5 wars that we've witnessed, but they are totally traumatized. I don't think the extent of what is happening to the people in Gaza and the long-term impact that's going to have, I don't think that is registered, because there isn't enough human contact. The only people on the front line there are the UN workers who have gone in, the World Health Organization people, the doctors that have gone in. They're on the front line. They see the human impact. And what the politicians and leaders should be doing is listening to them, getting an objective feedback from people going in and seeing the terrible impact this is having on so many people.
Oliver McTernan, Director of Forward Thinking, thank you very much for joining us from Cairo to talk more about the situation. We appreciate your analysis. Thank you, sir, very much indeed. Oliver McTernan of Forward Thinking. Thank you, sir. We continue, of course, to watch for all developments on the situation. Let's give you a little bit more about what's been happening. Of course, later on, we'll tell you more about the bombardment, which has continued in Gaza.